about this at Shadow Star Games.
Welcome back. This is Shattered over Shadow Star Games. Make sure to subscribe. Also go over to Charles Faulkner Jr.'s page and subscribe. This is part 2 of the Cerulean Gray Charles Faulkner Initiative. Military. The military is a gateway to stabilize, structure, discipline, specialized training, and access to a plethora of opportunities which are grossly lacking in the Black American ADOS community, and especially amongst the males. This can be attributed to a myriad of contributing environmental factors, from fatherlessness to poverty, unstable home environment, etc. However, whatever the contributing factor, all environmental factors have the same thing in common. It is the maldistribution of wealth and resource opportunities which impedes access to opportunities. The primary reason why it is suggested that Black American males, ideally 100,000 per year between the ages of 17 and 27, should and must consider the military is because, number one, it is an easy economic decision to make, and one of the best ways to tap into America's wealth, resources, and opportunities that are often scarce among the Black American community. Number two, it is one of the few American institutions that has the capability of taking young boys and girls from varying cultural, ethnic, educational, and racial backgrounds and transforming them into a diverse yet operational and cohesive unit. Number three, despite the stigma of the military, it is a very family-orientated environment. The benefits of service also extend to your family members who are dependents. For example, if a serviceman or servicewoman gets married, there are provisions to ensure that while the service member is deployed, their spouse and any other dependents are taken care of. The provisions are titled Basic Allowances, one for housing and another one for subsistence. Number four, because technology has advanced to a state which increases the survivability of frontline fighters, in the case of Black men, they are actually much safer on the front lines than they are in urban centers. Due to over-policing of urban areas, a young Black male is 3 times more likely to be killed by an officer than their white counterparts. In fact, more Black men have been killed by police officers than have died fighting the global war on terrorism. Crazy, isn't it? In fact, police officers as of 2016 have killed more civilians than the number of soldiers that were killed in action since 9/11. According to the analyst Kit O'Connell in 2012, Americans were 8 times more likely to be killed by a cop than by a terrorist. If coupled with that, with the sheer number of Black men killed via gun violence stemming from an intracultural conflict, in contrast, the military is one of the safest places to be as a young Black male. That stat is crazy. With military service comes a tremendous sense of pride and dignity that veterans not only gain, but pass on to their families, friends, and peers, who they share their experiences, learn skills, and inspiration. Number 5, the military currently leads the nation in trade skill training. Their area plethora of specialized skills training programs, and according to the 2019 fiscal year budget, the United States military is making strides to become a top STEM competitor. Other benefits include political provisions, post-service support, education through Montgomery GI Bill, vocational rehabilitation, medical, and one of the most important, the Guaranteed VA Home Loan, which guarantees home ownership for veterans who meet the requirements. All of these benefits can be inherited by any children the veteran may have. Number 6, the military overall is an excellent opportunity. It is one of the major pillars of Black American heritage that helped propel the Black American community forward through periods of severe racism, bigotry, and intolerance against Black Americans, which is partly responsible for the previously aforementioned environmental conditions. The military has become an example of true equality in that all service members have the same burden of performance. All service members of the same rank and skill level are paid the same regardless of cultural background, ethnicity, education, gender, or race. Law enforcement. Because of the unique experience of the Black American citizens within the United States, which has left an ongoing legacy of generational trauma imposed on Black Americans, perpetuated via the lack of wealth, resources, and opportunities, the major impedances, from which all environmental impedances, from fatherlessness to poverty, an unstable home environment, broken family structure, etc., stem from Oxford Handbook of the Economics of Poverty. That's the source. This is the massive and grossly neglected issue, which the broader society unaffected by these impedances would rather avoid. However, these impedances remain as virtually near permanent fixtures in the Black American community, wholly sustained through the enforcement of law. However, law enforcement in the Black American community has been for the most part adversarial, the effect of which has created a perception within the Black American community, the the us versus them mentality. This is wholly due to the differential in power. With the Black American communities within urban centers being over-policed, this us versus them mentality becomes its own impedance. The differential in power was created through systemic and institutional racism. However, due to the diminishing of the American empire, racism is an unsustainable practice for any future progress of American society. The push towards an equitable and fair society requires a shift in perception. Because of this us versus them mentality, the Black American community has for the most part perceived the police, who enforce law, as foreign occupiers within the Black American communities. It is difficult to perceive police any other way when young Black American males are arrested or incarcerated at a rate 3 times higher than their white counterparts, and more often than not receive more severe sentencing than their white counterparts for doing the same crime, and more than 3 times more likely to be killed by police than their white counterparts. Protesting and rioting so far has not been efficient or effective. We propose a more proactive approach. However, it requires the Black American community to take action in the proper capacity. By proper capacity, policy is implied. However, in the recent decades in the Black American community, we have become more focused on the political Super Bowl, i.e. the presidency, than the regular season, i.e. local politics. If there is a problem with the way the laws are enforced in your locale, city, or state, those are not issues the president can solve. However, they are issues that can be solved by local mayors, city council members, judges, district, city, or state attorneys, and governors. A more effective policy and practice would be to push for law enforcement pipelines in order to have more Black American officers on the police force that live in or are from the affected community of which they serve. Conversely, to become a police officer does not require a long legislative process, only that the person be qualified. The minimum requirement is a high school diploma, as long as the applicant does not have any of the following: felony convictions, serious misdemeanors, current drug use or past drug abuse, dishonorable discharge from the military, bad credit history, not always an impedance, history of domestic violence, not clean driving license, not always an impedance, unreported past crimes, past or current gang affiliations, poor employment record, not always an impedance, incorrect, false, or incomplete information given on the application form. Okay. Most Black American males qualify to be law enforcement. However, because of this impedance of perception stemming from the us versus them mentality, many Black American males are adverse to making the attempt to become one. Furthermore, because there are too few Black American law enforcement officers, the field of law enforcement continues to be viewed in the Black American community as adversarial. To change this perception, there is no better way than to encourage more black American males to become police officers. There has been efforts to improve relations between the police and the black American communities. However, they are received as shallow and faux attempts to pacify the black American community, usually following negative media exposure after police have committed a major transgression. To fix this impedance, it is incumbent on black American males to become police officers and begin serving their own communities. This increases police/community relations in various ways. 1. Black American law enforcement officers who live in or are from the communities they serve decrease tensions between the community and police because the black American community has officers the community can relate to. Number 2, this process inspires young black American males in a way that no other process can. Many young black American males don't realize they have the opportunity to become law enforcement officers and serve their communities. This is wholly due to this adversarial perception of the us versus them mentality, which both the community and the police often suffer from. Conversely, to use an example of this process is to take the story from an article written by Pam Cragen of the San Diego Union Tribune, August 18, 2019, of Montford Point Marine Robert L. Moore. He recalls a story from his childhood about what inspired him to become a Marine. He recounts seeing two black American Marines in uniform walking down the street and realized that he too could become a Marine as well. That image was firmly seated in his young teenage mind until he reached the age where he was old enough to join the Marines. The process is just that simple. Number 3, the inspiration of young black American males receive seeing the officers who look like them, whom also live in their communities or come from their communities and serve the same community, exposes them to potential opportunities in law enforcement while serving as an incentivization to serve themselves, which has the consequential effect to avoid the impedances that would disqualify them from becoming officers, just as it was in the case of the esteemed Marine Robert L. Moore. Thank you for your service, sir. Number 4, becoming an officer has its own incentives. In fact, the benefits are similar to the provisions offered by the military. Number 5, this is an impedance that can be solved by local mayors, city council members, judges, district, city, or state attorneys, and governors. Number 6, this method can reduce mass incarceration. Even if by a small margin, this method is still worth great consideration. Black American youth are the most negatively, okay, you hear it? Most negatively affected because A, majority of the officers that police black American communities are not from those communities. B, because those officers are not from those communities, they have a tendency to treat blacks within those communities with implicit or explicit bias unchecked. In order to check that bias, there must be more black American law enforcement officers. There has been a sentiment that states these questions. If there are good cops, why aren't they coming forward and taking the initiative to check the bad cops? Why aren't black officers doing anything to come out against white officers who abuse their state-granted authority against black people? The answer to both questions should be clear. It requires a change in the current policing culture. This push can only come from the people of the community these officers serve. The culture is adversarial, and a good cop coming forward can mean a cop's career if said good cop is unsure about just how many bad cops are within that department. While with black officers, it is a matter of numbers, and this too requires a push from the community as well. All right. That was great. That's part 2. We're going to go into labor on part 3. Thank you guys for coming to check us out. Make sure to subscribe to Charles Faulkner Jr. And I'll be back with part 3 very soon. Thanks guys for watching. Make sure to Shatterstar Games. Subscribe to us here at Shatterstar Games. And also make sure to go over to Charles Faulkner Jr.'s page and give him a subscription. And also download the Cerulean Gray Charles Faulkner Jr. initiative. It'll be down in the description. So thanks guys. Have a great day.
Follow us at Shatterstar Games.